November 12, 1942, the Western Desert, North Africa. An American vehicle lay abandoned beside the smouldering wrecks of a British supply column. Its crew had fled once their position became hopeless. According to standard Wehrmacht procedure, such captured equipment should be destroyed or left behind. But the commanding officer of the reconnaissance unit had a different thought. "Bring me our best mechanic," he ordered. "I want to know if we can make use of this thing." Within half an hour, the Afrika Korps mechanics uncovered something that quietly challenged their long-held faith in German engineering superiority. The revelation didn't strike like lightning. It unfolded gradually, an unsettling realization that grew with every inspection. A small metal placard on the dashboard read, "Willys MB." The Americans called it a Jeep. The first discovery. When the hood was lifted, the mechanics were stunned. The engine bay was spotless, designed with such clarity that even a novice could perform maintenance. Color, coded wiring, clearly marked components, and easily accessible parts, all arranged so logically that special tools were unnecessary. In more than 20 years of servicing German military vehicles, the senior mechanic had never seen anything quite like it. Every bolt was standard, every part interchangeable with another of its type. The Jeep was engineered not for perfection, but for production and practicality. Its 134 cubic inch Go Devil engine produced a modest 60 horsepower at 4,000 RPM, hardly impressive by German standards. Yet its genius lay in simplicity, an engine that anyone with basic tools and minimal training could repair. No factory technicians, no precision instruments, just straightforward functionality. The Americans, it seemed, had built this vehicle for farm boys and factory workers to maintain in the chaos of combat. A study in contrasts, by late 1942, the philosophical divide between American and German vehicle design was stark. America would go on to produce over 640,000 Jeeps before the war's end. Germany, by contrast, managed just over 50,000 Kübelwagens. And that difference signified more than numbers. It represented a clash of ideologies. The Jeep was the embodiment of American manufacturing philosophy, standardized, simplified, and designed for mass production by semi-skilled workers using interchangeable parts. When the officers approached, one of them asked, "Can we use it?" The senior mechanic looked up from the engine bay. "This machine," he said slowly, "was built by someone who understands what soldiers need in the field." Another officer frowned. "Nonsense. German engineering is the best in the world." The mechanic didn't argue. Instead, he gestured toward the drivetrain. "See this? One lever engages 4, wheel drive, just one. Our Kübelwagens require several operations, and most don't have 4-wheel drive at all. The flaw in perfection, the Volkswagen Type 82 Kübelwagen, designed by Ferdinand Porsche, was indeed a fine vehicle. Light, fuel-efficient, and air-cooled, it was less vulnerable to enemy fire. But it had a fatal weakness. It was rear-wheel drive only. in the deserts of North Africa, the mud of Russia, or the rugged hills of Italy. That limitation was crippling. The Jeep, on the other hand, could power all four wheels instantly, and its controls were so simple that any soldier could master them in minutes. The suspension used basic leaf springs. Crude, compared to the Kübelwagens torsion bars, yet vastly easier to repair. Its electrical system was rugged and uncomplicated. It could run on almost any grade of gasoline without modification. Even its extra weight, about 450 pounds, compared to the German vehicle's 540, proved advantageous. That additional mass gave the Jeep a sturdier frame, built to endure abuse and overloads that would destroy lighter machines. The Americans, it seemed, valued durability over perfection, designing for real, world punishment, rather than laboratory conditions. Trial by desert, the mechanics took the Jeep back to their forward position. Over 3 days, they tested it relentlessly. Through sand, over rocks, and with loads far beyond its official capacity. Where the Kübelwagen faltered, the Jeep pushed on effortlessly. Its low, range gearing let it crawl over obstacles at walking speed, while its four-wheel drive gripped terrain that left other vehicles stranded. Word spread quickly through the Afrika Korps. The Americans had built a light vehicle that surpassed the Wehrmacht's in almost every meaningful way. Officers and mechanics from nearby units came to see it for themselves. At first, they doubted. Then they admired. And finally, they worried. A sobering realization one logistics officer, who had worked in German automotive plants before the war, examined the Jeep for hours. His conclusion was blunt. "This represents a fundamental difference in thinking," he said. "We pursue engineering perfection. The Americans pursue manufacturability. And in total war, that makes all the difference." He pointed to the cast engine block. "See this? It's not finely machined. They sacrifice precision to speed up production. A semi-skilled worker can build this engine in a fraction of the time it takes to produce one of ours." He moved on to the stamped metal body panels. "These are crude compared to ours, but they can be produced by the thousands in factories that used to make refrigerators and washing machines. They've converted their entire economy to war production. We simply cannot match that." A heavy silence fell over the officers. The uncomfortable truth was clear. Germany's obsession with precision was ill-suited for total war. The American strategy, adequate quality at overwhelming quantity, was proving devastatingly effective. The bigger picture. That night, one mechanic drafted a detailed technical report, documenting every strength and flaw of the Jeep. His findings joined thousands of similar reports streaming into German intelligence from every front. By late 1942, the Wehrmacht's analysts confirmed what their troops already knew. American factories were producing vehicles faster than Germany, Italy, and Japan combined. Ford's Willow Run plant alone was completing a B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes at peak output. Liberty ships were being launched faster than U-boats could sink them. The statistics were chilling. In 1942, U.S. military vehicle production exceeded the combined total of the Axis powers and was still accelerating. The captured Jeep soon became something of a legend among the Afrika Korps, a symbol of a dawning, unsettling truth. The war was no longer about the best machines. It was about the ones that could be built by the millions. Soldiers soon began competing for the privilege of driving it. Officers used the captured Jeep for forward reconnaissance, trusting its reliability more than their own vehicles. When parts eventually wore out, replacements were scavenged from other captured Jeeps with remarkable ease. Every component seemed interchangeable. By early 1943, the Afrika Korps had seized dozens of these American machines. Wehrmacht mechanics quietly organized informal networks, sharing repair tips and trading salvaged parts. A black market even emerged around captured U.S. vehicles and equipment. A functioning Jeep could fetch a price far higher than its theoretical value. Everyone understood its unmatched utility in desert warfare. Then came May 13, 1943, the day the Afrika Korps surrendered in Tunisia. Around 250,000 German and Italian soldiers laid down their arms. Their war was over, but their education in American industrial might had only begun. A journey into the American machine. The contrast between German and American logistics became impossible to ignore. During their transport to captivity, American trucks carried prisoners in numbers that would have required entire convoys of horse-drawn wagons in the Wehrmacht. Massive Liberty ships, once taking 8 months to build, now rolled out in just 5 or 6 weeks, each one ferrying thousands of prisoners across the Atlantic. Every stage of the operation displayed an organizational scale that dwarfed anything Germany had achieved. At the Oran Processing Center in Algeria, captured mechanics looked on in disbelief as American motor pool sergeants serviced fleets of vehicles with effortless precision. Dozens of jeeps, trucks, and command cars stood lined in neat rows. Young American soldiers, many barely out of their teens, worked confidently, tools always at hand, parts arriving instantly, and every vehicle built from familiar, standardized components. One sergeant, noticing a captured mechanic watching closely, called out in rough German, accented English, "You a mechanic?" "I was Afrika Korps vehicle maintenance." The prisoner replied. The sergeant grinned. "Well, no war for you now, but I bet you've got questions. Come on, I'll show you around. Don't worry. You can't steal anything here." An afternoon lesson in simplicity. What followed was an education neither man would forget. The American led him through the motor pool, explaining their approach to maintenance with refreshing honesty. "See, we build everything so any farm boy can fix it," he said. "Most of our guys never touched an engine before the army, so we make it simple. Color, coded wires, standard bolts. Everything labeled. The manuals are written so a sixth grader could follow them. If something breaks, anyone can repair it, no specialists needed. The German mechanic studied a disassembled Jeep engine. Every part was numbered and clearly marked. The maintenance manual included detailed illustrations and step-by-step instructions written in plain language. "How many of these do you produce?" he asked. The sergeant shrugged. "No idea. Thousands every week. Maybe more. They come off the line faster than we can ship them. We've got so many Jeeps that if one breaks down, we just grab another instead of waiting on repairs. Thousands every week." The number seemed absurd. Yet the evidence surrounded him. This single motor pool contained more vehicles than entire German divisions possessed. And it was only one small American base. The scale of production. The sergeant continued, leading the visitor past rows of heavy machinery. "Dodge trucks. These can haul loads that take two of yours. Half tracks. We build them by the thousands. And these big transporters. They carry tanks without wearing out their tracks. Thing is, we learned from the last war. Every vehicle shares parts. A bolt from a Jeep fits a truck, fits a half track. Same electrical fittings. Same hydraulics, same systems. That keeps things simple. Instead of needing 1,000 different parts, we only need a couple hundred, and we make them by the millions." That was. Secret German engineers had missed component commonality. It wasn't just about production speed. It was about creating a logistical ecosystem where any part could fit anywhere and any mechanic could fix anything. The entire system supported itself. Witness to an industrial giant. The journey from North Africa to the American mainland became a rolling lesson in industrial efficiency. At Norfolk, Virginia, prisoners saw a port handling thousands of tons of cargo each day with mechanical precision. Towering cranes, loaded and unloaded ships at speeds that would have required battalions of dock workers in Hamburg. Trains carried prisoners across the continent in passenger coaches that felt like luxury by German standards. Along the routes, the Germans saw something they could scarcely comprehend. Vehicles everywhere. Cars filled factory parking lots. Trucks formed endless convoys on highways. And depot yards overflowed with military transports awaiting shipment to every corner of the globe. At Camp Hearn, Texas, captured mechanics were assigned to the motor pool. American commanders welcomed their expertise. The war effort needed every skilled hand. For the next 2 years, German and American mechanics worked side by side maintaining the vehicles that kept the camp running. The Americans approached their work with a striking practicality. They weren't chasing engineering perfection. They were focused on keeping machines operational. When something broke, they fixed it immediately. When parts were missing, they improvised. When a vehicle was beyond repair, they stripped it for spares and requested a new one, which usually arrived within days, not weeks. Two philosophies collide. The German prisoners took careful note. Their training emphasized strict adherence to factory procedures and specialized tools. The Americans, by contrast, valued adaptability and speed. In peacetime, the German way produced finely tuned machines. But in the chaos of war, the American system proved far more effective. At Camp Hahn, the motor pool handled hundreds of vehicles each month. Jeeps came in for service, were repaired within hours, and rolled out again the same day. Efficiency came from two things: an abundance of parts and universal compatibility. If a part was needed, the storeroom had it. If a tool was missing, it was replaced instantly. If a vehicle died, another took its place. One German mechanic befriended an American soldier who had worked for Ford before the war. The man spoke with quiet pride. "Before the army, I worked at Willow Run, Ford's bomber plant near Detroit. Biggest factory on Earth. We started building B-24 Liberators in 1942. By the time I got drafted last year, we were rolling one off the line every single hour." The German paused, stunned. One bomber every hour. 24 a day. Over 700 a month. The numbers were almost beyond comprehension. And for the captured men of the Afrika Korps, they revealed a simple, terrifying truth: America wasn't just fighting the war. It was manufacturing victory itself. How was such production even possible? The German mechanic asked. The American smiled. Mass production principles. Henry Ford figured it out decades ago. You don't need master craftsmen if you break complex manufacturing into simple, repeatable steps. Give 1,000 workers one small task each, and you'll build more in a week than a craftsman could in a year. A farm kid can learn his job in days. Tighten one bolt in one place, over and over, and that's all it takes. That, the mechanic realized, was the fundamental difference. German production depended on skilled artisans crafting high-quality machines in limited numbers. American production relied on semi-skilled workers assembling good enough machines in overwhelming quantities. The American continued, "Same goes for Jeeps. Willys builds them. So does Ford. Both use the same blueprints. A Willys part fits a Ford Jeep perfectly. They're totally interchangeable. If one factory gets bombed, the other keeps rolling. Mechanics only need to learn one vehicle, not dozens." The German thought back to the Wehrmacht's tangled logistics. Dozens of truck types from multiple manufacturers, each with unique components, each demanding its own tools and training. Volkswagen made the Kübelwagen, but command cars came from other firms, and captured vehicles from across Europe further complicated things. It was a logistical nightmare. The Americans, by contrast, had streamlined their entire military through standardization and uniformity. The real genius, the American said, is that we design things for manufacturability right from the start. When the Army called for a light recon vehicle back in 1940, they gave companies 75 days to deliver a prototype. American Bantam did it in 49. Then Willys and Ford refined the design for mass production. Everything had to be easy to build, easy to fix, and easy to replace. The German mechanic had examined enough captured Jeeps to understand. They weren't elegant. A German engineer would have found them crude. But elegance slowed production. And mass production was what was winning the war. The tide turns. By the summer of 1944, rumors of Operation Overlord began circulating through the Pabedru camps. When confirmation came that the Allies had landed successfully in Normandy, few prisoners were surprised. They'd already seen what American industry could do. The Allies had the means to construct an invasion fleet in months. Something that would have taken Germany years. Newspapers and radio broadcasts described the unimaginable scale of the landings. Thousands of vehicles in the first waves alone. Jeeps, trucks, tanks, amphibious transports, all ferried across the channel on specialized landing craft built by the thousands. 6,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, 150,000 men in the opening assault. Within weeks, millions more followed. Supplied by factories that produced faster than the Wehrmacht could destroy. Many German prisoners reflected bitterly on their pre-war confidence. They had believed in German technological superiority. And in many ways, they'd been right. German tanks were heavier, their aircraft often more advanced, their small arms exceptional. But none of it mattered. America could build 5 tanks for every one German, 10 trucks for every German truck, and 100 jeeps for every KU Belwagen. The arithmetic of defeat one afternoon. The prisoners watched American soldiers loading jeeps onto transport trucks, bound for Europe. Young drivers maneuvered each vehicle up the ramps with effortless confidence. Dozens were loaded within an hour. A German mechanic realized that this single operation, just one afternoon in Texas, moved more vehicles than his entire division had possessed in North Africa. And this same process was happening in depots and camps across the United States every single day. The math was undeniable. Germany had converted its economy to total war, cutting civilian output to feed its factories. Yet in 1943, it had built fewer than 100 Zalosen military vehicles of all types. The United States, still maintaining a booming civilian economy, produced over 2 million in that same year. The gap wasn't only in numbers, it was in philosophy. American machines were built for warsy, easy to maintain, simple to operate, rugged and standardized. German vehicles were engineered to perfection. But perfection didn't survive the battlefield. The last gamble in November 1944. Word reached the camps of a new German offensive in the Ardennes. The Battle of the Bulge. Hitler's final gamble. It relied on capturing Allied fuel depots. Germany no longer had enough fuel to sustain large armoured movements. Even more astonishing were reports of Operation Grafe. Otto Skorzeny's daring commando plan. His men, dressed in American uniforms and driving captured US vehicles, attempted to infiltrate Allied lines to cause chaos. If even Skorzeny, Hitler's favoured commando, the man who rescued Mussolini, had been forced to depend on captured American jeeps because German vehicles were inadequate. That spoke volumes about the Reich situation. The operation failed. American military police quickly exposed the infiltrators through questions only real GIs could answer. Details of baseball, movie stars, slang, and procedure. The offensive itself soon collapsed, not only from fierce resistance, but because German armored divisions simply ran out of fuel. Tanks were abandoned where they stood. Infantry reverted to horse-drawn wagons as motorized logistics broke down completely. By January 1945, the last German offensive in the West was over. The end, and the lesson, by spring. The news they had long expected finally came. The Red Army closed in from the east. American and British forces crossed the Rhine and swept deep into Germany from the west. In the Camp Motorpool, the German mechanics kept working, maintaining vehicles for the very army that had defeated their homeland. There was no pride in it, but neither was there shame. They understood the truth. Germany hadn't lost for lack of bravery or skill. It had lost because it had challenged an industrial power beyond imagination. One April afternoon, an American soldier approached with a message. Germany surrendered. War's over in Europe. The mechanics nodded. They'd known this was coming. What happens to us now? One asked. You'll go home, the soldier said. Maybe not right away. Takes time to sort it all out. But you'll get there. The mechanic thought quietly. Home, to a nation reduced to ruins. To cities flattened by the same industrial power that had produced the Jeep. He once studied in North Africa. The American broke the silence. You're a smart guy. Did you really think Germany could win? The mechanic hesitated, then spoke softly. Before the war, yes. We believed German quality would always triumph over American quantity. We'd seen your civilian products before the war. Many were inferior. We assumed your military machines were the same. But we were wrong. When we examined that first Jeep in '42, we understood our mistake. We had confused peacetime quality with wartime effectiveness. Your Jeep wasn't superior to our KUU Bellwagen in engineering. It was superior in design philosophy. It was built for production, for the field for war. And that, he said, was decisive. The American nodded. Yeah. We don't build perfect machines. We build enough of them. For a moment, both men stood in silence. Two mechanics from opposite sides of a global war, united in a shared understanding of what had truly decided its outcome. The repatriation process began later that year. But for those who had seen America's industrial power firsthand, the lesson of the Jeep and of total war would never be forgotten. German prisoners boarded ships for their long journey home. One former mechanic arrived in Bremen in January 1946. Passing through Allied processing centers before being released. The city was unrecognizable, reduced to rubble as far as the eye could see. Yet amidst the devastation, something caught his attention. American vehicles everywhere. Jeeps ferried Allied officers through the ruined streets. Trucks delivered food and relief supplies. Motorpools bustled, with both German civilians and Allied soldiers working side by side. Curious, he approached one of the motorpools and spoke to the American officer in charge. His English, learned during captivity in Texas, was halting but understandable. Sir, I'm a former Oberfeldwebel of the Afrika Korps, recently repatriated from Camp Hearn, Texas. I'm a trained vehicle mechanic with experience maintaining American equipment. Are you hiring civilian workers? The captain studied his papers. Says here you worked in our motor pool back in Texas. That right? Yes, sir. 2 years. The captain nodded and jotted a note. We're short on mechanics. Most of the skilled ones either didn't survive the war or are still in POW camps. You can start tomorrow. Pays in occupation script. Good for rations and essentials. And so, the former Afrika Korps mechanic found himself working for the very army he had once fought, maintaining the same vehicles he'd once examined as enemy equipment. The Allies needed skilled hands. He needed work. The war was over. Life went on, rebuilding from the ruins over the next few months. He witnessed the first stirrings of Germany's reconstruction. American aid flowed in with astonishing organization. Food, medicine, raw materials, all arriving in American trucks, all directed by meticulous American planners. In the motor pool, he trained young Germans, many of them former Wehrmacht soldiers like himself, teaching them American maintenance methods. These men, now civilians, needed new skills for a Germany that would no longer have an army. He shared the lessons he had learned: simplicity over complexity, function over form, practical results over theoretical perfection. These were the same principles that had defined American vehicles, and they would soon reshape German industry itself. By 1947, he was promoted to supervisor of the German civilian staff at the motor pool. The American captain respected his skill and leadership, often seeking his advice. One evening, over a drink, the captain asked, "You've worked with both German and American machines. If you were designing a new vehicle for post-war Germany, what would it look like?" The mechanic thought for a moment. "I'd take the American approach but adapt it for Europe. Smaller than a Jeep. More fuel efficient, but built on the same philosophy. Standardized parts, easy maintenance, and design focused on manufacturing, not prestige. Europe's roads are narrow, and fuel is scarce, but we need the same kind of reliability." The captain smiled. Smart thinking. With Marshall Plan funds coming in, German factories will rebuild fast. And they'll be studying our methods. The future's going to be American-style mass production, adjusted for Europe. His words proved prophetic. The industrial renaissance, in the years that followed, West German manufacturing embraced the best of both world. American-style mass production combined with German precision. The result was an economic transformation that lifted the nation from ruins into prosperity. Companies like Volkswagen, which had once built the wartime Kübelwagen, became global giants. The Volkswagen Beetle, simple, affordable, and reliable, embodied this new synthesis. It was engineered with German care, yet designed for mass production in the American sense. Former Wehrmacht mechanics who had worked in American prison camp motor pools played a quiet but vital role. They had seen how interchangeable components simplified logistics, how standardized maintenance reduced downtime, how designing for manufacturability, not perfection, made mass production possible. German manufacturers emerging from the ashes didn't try to recreate their pre-war ideals. They merged German craftsmanship with American efficiency. By the early 1950s, the results were unmistakable. Volkswagen's production soared from thousands of vehicles a year to hundreds of thousands. Mercedes-Benz integrated assembly line processes while preserving quality. BMW restructured its plants to use common components across models. The so-called Wirtschaftswunder, the German economic miracle, owed much to these lessons. West Germany became an export powerhouse known for vehicles that combined reliability, affordability, and smart design. This fusion of philosophies created products neither pro-war Germany nor America could have produced alone. The legacy of the Jeep. U.S. Army historian Hugh M. Cole, who interviewed German generals after the war, later wrote that they admired the Jeep more than any other weapon in the American arsenal. Not the B-17 bombers, not the Sherman tanks, not the artillery. It was the humble Jeep, they said. That revealed the secret behind America's triumph, a philosophy of manufacturing that valued simplicity, standardization, and function above all else. General George C. Marshall himself called the Jeep America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. It wasn't exaggeration. The Jeep embodied the principles that would shape post-war global industry. Ease of production, interchangeability, durability, and practicality. By late 1943, the U.S. Army had studied enough captured Kübelwagens to publish Technical Manual TME-9 AHO3, a complete guide to operating and maintaining German vehicles. It was officially released on June 6, 1944, D-Day, just in time for Allied troops landing in France to use any captured German transport effectively. Germany, despite capturing thousands of Jeeps, never produced an equivalent manual. They didn't need to. The Jeep was so intuitive that any competent mechanic could service it without instruction. This contrast spoke volumes. The Kübelwagen required a detailed manual for Americans to understand its complexity. The Jeep needed none for Germans to operate it. That was the defining difference. Sophistication versus practicality. Engineering brilliance versus design efficiency. Reflections of the past by the 1960s. Reunions of former Afrika Korps veterans began taking place across Germany. They gathered to honor fallen comrades and share memories of the war. At one such reunion in 1967, the topic of vehicles came up. A former mechanic spoke first. The Kübelwagen was better engineered in many ways. Lighter, more fuel efficient. Perfect for the desert with its air-cooled engine. But the Jeep was better for modern warfare. 4. Wheel drive. Easy repairs, interchangeable parts. And, most importantly, built-in numbers we could never dream of. An old reconnaissance officer nodded. I remember capturing our first Jeep in '41. We thought it crude at first, primitive. It took us months to realize that its simplicity was its genius. By R43, every unit wanted captured Jeeps because they simply worked. Another veteran added quietly, "The worst moment for me was realizing that America was building more Jeeps in a week than Germany produced Kübelwagens in a year. That's when I knew we couldn't win. Not because of strategy, but because of arithmetic. They could replace losses faster than we could inflict them." In the end, that was the consensus among them all. It wasn't the weapons that decided the war. It was the philosophy behind their creation. German soldiers held deep respect for the Kübelwagen, admiring its engineering and performance. Yet, they came to realize that the Jeep, and what it symbolized, had ultimately been decisive. Not just because of its battlefield utility, though it was remarkable in that regard, but because it represented the overwhelming industrial power that stood behind it. The Wehrmacht's logistical reality had been grim from the beginning. By 1943, nearly 80% of German divisions still depended on horse-drawn transport. At the start of the war, Germany fielded around 514,000 horses, a number that would rise to 2.75 million by the war's end, with roughly 1.1 million animals in service at any time. Over 2 million horses and mules would die before the conflict was over. In contrast, every American division was fully motorized. U.S. forces relied entirely on trucks and mechanized vehicles for logistics. Their supply convoys could cover hundreds of kilometers in a single day. German supply lines, limited by the pace of horses, rarely managed more than 30 kilometers, even under good conditions. When German generals later analyzed the reasons for their defeat, they pointed not to poor leadership or tactical failure, but to a crushing material imbalance. German troops had fought bravely. German officers had led capably. But no amount of skill could offset an enemy whose industry could produce equipment faster, cheaper, and in greater numbers than they could ever hope to match. The Jeep came to embody that reality. Every German soldier who saw one understood what it meant. A machine so plentiful the Americans treated it as expendable, so reliable it required minimal care, so simple that any soldier could drive or repair it, and so effective that German units eagerly used captured Jeeps whenever possible, often preferring them over their own vehicles. From Jeep to Gulf, the evolution of a lesson. In 1976, the U.S. Army finally began replacing the Jeep with the HMMWV, ending an extraordinary 35-year service life. Even then, thousands of Jeeps continued to serve in reserve units and Allied militaries worldwide. That same year, Volkswagen celebrated the production of its 1 millionth Golf, the direct descendant of the Beetle, and the embodiment of the same design philosophy. The mechanic in Bremen had once described it married German precision with American production efficiency, a fusion that had rebuilt a nation. By the 1980s, West Germany had become an industrial superpower. Its automotive companies exported millions of cars annually, and made in Germany became synonymous with reliability and technical excellence. But that excellence now rested upon the bedrock of mass production, principles first learned from the Americans. The final reunion, the last Afrika Korps reunion, was held in 1998. Fewer than 24 veterans attended. Men now in their 70s and 80s, survivors of a war that had ended more than 50 years before. During the gathering, someone mentioned that a local museum had restored an original Willys MB Jeep. Naturally, they all wanted to see it. They stood around the vehicle in silence. Elderly now, but once young soldiers who had fought under the desert sun, they studied the Jeep's familiar contours with the eyes of mechanics who had learned to respect it long ago. Oh. One reached out and ran his hand along the hood, his weathered fingers tracing the steel. "I captured one of these in '42, he said softly. "Used it for 3 months, before I was wounded at El Alamein. Best vehicle I ever drove. Better than anything we had." Another nodded. "I examined one in Tunisia just before we surrendered. Couldn't believe how simple it was. That's when I realized we'd been designing everything wrong. Too complicated, too hard to build or repair." A third veteran added quietly, "They made over 600,000 of these. We built 50,000 Kübelwagens." That ratio says it all. For a long moment, they said nothing. The Jeep stood before them. A museum piece now, its war long finished. But for these men, it was more than a relic. It was a symbol of the abundance that had overwhelmed scarcity, of the practicality that had triumphed over perfection, of the production power that had decided the war. "We never had vehicles like this," one finally murmured. "Not in these numbers, not with this reliability. Not built with this mindset. We chased perfection. They chased production." A lesson learned in defeat. That was the lesson the Wehrmacht's mechanics had absorbed. First in the sands of North Africa, then in Italy's mountains, and later in France's fields. The Jeep had been more than a tool of war. It had been a teacher. These mechanics, humbled by defeat, proved to be exceptional students. They studied not just how American machines worked, but why they were designed the way they were, and what that revealed about an entirely different philosophy of engineering. That hard-earned understanding became the foundation of Germany's reconstruction and eventual prosperity. Defeat taught humility. American machinery taught functional engineering. Together, those lessons forged a new German industrial mindset. One that valued efficiency, standardization, and purpose over pre-war arrogance and obsession with perfection. The story of the Wehrmacht mechanics and the Jeep is, in the end, a story of learning through loss. How a simple vehicle became a classroom, and how the defeated became the architects of one of the world's greatest post-war recoveries. For years, pride had convinced them that German engineering was unmatched, that precision and sophistication would always triumph over simplicity and mass production. But reality proved otherwise. American vehicles weren't necessarily more advanced in technical terms, yet they were better suited to the brutal demands of modern warfare. They could be produced in enormous numbers, repaired by soldiers with minimal training, and built from interchangeable parts that kept supply chains efficient. They were rugged, forgiving, and above all, functional. That practicality, when multiplied by America's vast industrial capacity, created a tsunami of material superiority that no amount of German skill or valor could overcome. The Wehrmacht fielded superb soldiers, capable officers, and formidable equipment, but it lacked the industrial foundation needed to sustain a total war against enemies who could replace their losses faster than Germany could inflict them. The men who understood this most clearly were the mechanics, those who maintained both German and captured Allied vehicles. They saw the contrast firsthand. They worked with machines born from entirely different design philosophies, and they knew which one held up better under fire. That hard, earned understanding shaped Germany's recovery after the war. When these mechanics trained apprentices, they passed on lessons forged through hardship. When they advised factories, they urged standardization and simplicity. When they began designing again, they prioritized ease of manufacture and long-term reliability over needless complexity. The engineers who rebuilt Germany's industrial base had studied American machinery up close. In captured workshops, prison motor pools, and production lines observed after the war. From those experiences emerged a new synthesis. German precision fused with American production efficiency. The result was extraordinary. By the 1970s, West Germany had become a world leader in manufacturing and exports. Its post-war economic miracle validated the lessons of defeat. Germany had shed the arrogance that once led it to ruin and adopted a new, practical philosophy, inspired by the methods of its former enemies. The Jeep's role in transformation. The Jeep played a quiet but crucial role in this transformation. Every Wehrmacht mechanic who repaired a captured Jeep absorbed lessons about American design thinking. Every officer who rode in one noticed its simplicity and resilience. Every soldier who saw endless convoys of Allied vehicles realized what German propaganda had hidden, that the war's outcome would be decided not just by courage or tactics, but by production and logistics. These shared experiences among hundreds of thousands of soldiers and prisoners fostered a new understanding. Germany's defeat had been industrial, not merely military. That realization deeply influenced the mindset of post-war reconstruction. German leaders and engineers no longer sought to restore the old pre-war ideals of craftsmanship and complexity. Instead, they embraced American-style mass production, designing products that could be built quickly, maintained easily, and sold globally. Reliability replaced perfection as the ultimate goal. A legacy forged in the desert. The Wehrmacht mechanics who first examined captured Jeeps in the deserts of North Africa in 1942 could never have imagined how profoundly the experience would shape the future. They had been trying only to assess a captured enemy vehicle, to understand its capabilities, its strengths, and whether it could serve their own needs. But in doing so, they stumbled upon truths about engineering and manufacturing that would guide their nation's rebirth. Those mechanics are all gone now. Their voices have faded into history. But the lessons they uncovered live on, embedded in factories, production lines, and design philosophies around the world. Every car built for ease of manufacture, every standardized part, every emphasis on reliability over complexity, all owe something to the philosophy embodied by that humble Jeep. This was the Jeep's true legacy, not just as a weapon of war, but as a teacher. It taught that pride must yield to practicality. That function matters more than perfection. That simplicity, efficiency, and adaptability can change the fate of nations. Those who once admitted, "Why never had vehicles like this?" became the very architects of Germany's renewal. Their humility, born from defeat and tempered by observation, proved far more valuable than the pride that had preceded catastrophe. In November 1942, as Wehrmacht mechanics examined a captured Jeep beneath the North African sun, they began a journey of discovery that would echo for generations. Their admission that they had never had machines like it marked not just the end of an illusion, but the beginning of wisdom that would help rebuild a nation